Hi, I'm Danya,
And I'm Shaheen.
and you're listening to or watching
Reality Woo Woo.
It's Not Something to Believe in.
It's something to talk about.
And on today's episode, we are off and running with the Solstice Series, and we are so excited today. We have Julia Lemke joining us. I wrote in our description that she's a medium because she is, but she's also a very gifted meditation coach and guide. She's an incredible poet, and if you're lucky enough to follow her on Instagram, she does a ton of like tarot live readings. It's she's just a channel from the universe, and we're so excited to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I knew you were
Amazing.
coming because I'm also psychic.
Shaheen knew it wasn't the
By the
like
way,
careful earth like sign schedule that I have put together. But I think a wonderful way for us to kind of start it off is like how do we know each other, Julia? How did we come to find one another?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one of the things that I manifested was doing one of my readings for an influencer that I followed for a long time, and then she ended up loving the session and like sent me a friend of hers who also has a pretty big following, and
hmm,
you were following her, and it was
hmm,
just very divine timing when she shared her experience. You're like, yep, that's what I need. That's like the next thing to kind of help me through this season of life that I'm in. And this was like right before you took the leap of faith into like really putting yourself out there as doing like intuitive work. So I had kind of the pleasure of working
Yeah,
with you and supporting you through that transition. And yeah, I
I
don't
guiding
know
you
what
especially
through
love
it.
what your
this.
No,
version is.
it's so funny to like hear you reflect it back. Like I can picture exactly. So I was sitting in JFK. I had just finished like multiple meetings with a ton of people in New York, and it was just like lots of fast, whatever, scrolling through Instagram. My favorite influencer had posted about doing an essence mapping session with you. And I was like, yep, exactly. Purchased it in the airport. Was like birthday present to myself. Now must do this. And that was so Julia offers, are you offering it right now or
Mm-hmm.
yes? Okay. So Julia offers these incredible essence mapping sessions. And that was one of the probably most reflective healing sessions I've ever had in my life. Where, we kind of went chakra by chakra. We really just talked about, what I was feeling and going on in my body. And it was incredible. So yes, Julie and I ended up working together for a few months. She's my personal guide and coach. And it was like right in that. I remember when we first started working together, my desires were a little all over the place. It was very like, I want a new job, but I don't want to work in corporate America anymore. And you were like, okay, sounds sounds weird, but we'll get to it when we get to it. Um,
Well, if Danya didn't already give such a rave review, I also want to just point out that Julia, you're a Leo, and Danya hates Leos. So this
it's
must
I
mean a lot.
know. I was
This
listening to the
must mean a
Leo
lot.
episode
I'm
right
sorry, by
before
the way.
this.
Just
I was
saying
like,
it
oh, I
straight
didn't
up.
know she hated me.
No, but this says a lot to like, I don't know, trust the energy of another in that way. I almost feel like you saying that you manifested this and like divine timing situation for Danya must have been too, because she needed to hear this from a Leo.
Yeah, we magnetized towards each other right at the right moment, which was really exciting.
I love
I'm
that.
curious beyond essence mapping, Julia, like what are you creating in your day to day right now that's like kind of driving things?
Yeah, so about a little over a year ago, there was a very clear message from the universe that like I was meant to shift my work more into the creative realm, actually like supporting people with their creative works and things of that nature. And part of that was building a community. So I wanted to actually bring people together. So I love doing the one on one work and I love doing those sessions, but I wanted something that was more ongoing, more community based, and focused around all different types of creatives. My vision was really bringing together people that are interested in all different things. And like there's astrology newbies with astrology experts, there's tarot newbies with tarot experts, and really bringing in this like mindset of creativity and spirituality in one place where we could all just like learn and explore and play and work on
Fun.
ourselves and heal, but within a more lighthearted space. So a lot of what I've done within that is teaching meditation classes, and it's never something I thought I would do, but I just kept receiving like this positive feedback, and I just kept hearing that this was something that people enjoyed. So I kept doing it, and I kept iterating. And the purpose of the community is to really help us with perfectionism. And that starts with me. So it starts with me every time creating something that I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's try it. And
Yeah.
let's just see how it goes. And let's see what your experience is. Let's talk about it. So that's a big part of what I'm doing now, is facilitating these online classes. And I just moved to San Diego, so I'm sure I'll be doing some in-person events at some point as well. I'm also doing a lot of writing. I'm working on my manuscript right now for my first poetry book. So that's like a big
Ooh.
creative baby that I've had for about like 5 years of writing that I'm ready to
Nice.
put out into the world later this summer. So this is like perfect timing for the podcast
And the world is
episode.
ready to receive it.
That's
Yes.
really,
Yes.
I would love to, I mean, I want to talk about everything that you just mentioned, but I have a theory that I'm working on lately. You've met my friend Komal, and then I've also been like circling around a book in my own head as well. You said you've been working on the poetry book for the last 5 years, and that kind of coincides. Are you in your Saturn return now, or did you finish it?
I finished it last year.
Okay.
And then I went into another Saturn transit almost immediately after. So I was like trying to push it. I was like trying to push it out last year. I was turning 30 in August, and it's a total Leo baby. Like the book is kind of the embodiment of the strength card in tarot. So like I know it needs to be in Leo season. So I was like trying to get it out by my 30th birthday.
Oh,
But I was
interesting.
still in that Saturn. It was a Saturn trine moon. So it was just a lot more stuff that still wanted to come up throughout
Yeah.
the end of 2023. And I swear, like the first week of January, it was just like this weight lifted, like the new year energy, but it was also just like this Saturn transit was over, and I was able to like start to create again and start to like have some forward momentum.
Of this
So you
year
have
or
your-
last year?
This year.
You have your
I get that.
Saturn
I
in
feel that.
Aquarius. No. What do you have your Saturn in? Capricorn? Yeah. No, that's my theory, is that I think some of our greatest like gifts, our greatest like big pushes come through that Saturn return.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. Okay, so we kind of have alluded to like what your big three are, but just to share with the audience. So your sun is in Leo, and as Shaheen mentioned, I was shocked to find it out when you told me you were a Leo. I was like, no,
you were so surprised.
It was the opposite. I was like, I like you way too much for that to be true. Your moon is in Gemini, and so that makes sense to me because you and I are chit chatters, and I'm a big Gemini. I love Geminis. We're both ruled by Mercury, and just like it's always a flow of conversation. So I love that. And then you're a Sag rising. I'm also a Sag rising. So that's what I think it is that the other pieces are so complementary that I'm like, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of fire in my chart, and I feel like I don't present fiery. So I actually have an astrology theory for you all as well.
Yeah,
I'm
kick it over.
So something I've been playing with is maybe the way people perceive you is whatever element your Venus is in. So I recently did an event, and I was assigned as the water element. And everyone was like, of course you're water. Of course you're water. And I was so surprised because I'm like, yeah, but my chart's all like fire and air. Not that much water, but my Venus is in Cancer.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Specifically within the context of relationships. And like once you've done some work on yourself, you're not like fully in like ego and reactivity, but when you're like showing up in your element, in your essence, like is that more of the Venus element?
I love that theory.
Yeah.
Now I'm like really kind of like analyzing it within, and I love the articulation of healed versus non. And I think we, Shaheen and I deal certainly with stereotypes on this podcast. We like going through like the basic bitch definition of things, but we do like to
Yeah.
dig a little
I
bit
love
more. And
stereotypes.
there's a big difference between how you come out of the womb and what your journey is sort of dictating, based on kind of your natal chart. So I like that. And yeah, it makes me think, my Venus is in Libra, and an unhealed Libra, definitely obsessed with romantic relationships and also using relationships to facilitate different gains in my life, I would say. But from a healed perspective, I am really I'm really focused on balance and the division of labor a little bit, particularly within relationships. I'm very focused on that, and like the fairness of relationships is something I think about quite a lot.
I feel like people appoint you to that role in their lives.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, we need
Yeah.
we need you to do this for us. And I'm like, okay, happy to do that. I'm curious. I mean, you have tons of theories, and I think you're incredibly well versed in astrology. Has it always been a part of your life? I'm curious on like what that journey is with you. Is it like something that's relatively new, or is it kind of like a lifelong relationship that you've had?
Yeah, great question. I feel like a total beginner. I first got into the spirituality side of things through the Enneagram. So, like, I'm fully expert in that system. That's like how I really discovered myself, was through that. And I kind of feel like you have one system that you get really good at, and then it's fun to add on others just to see, but it's hard to become like fully expert in everything. So I feel very beginner to astrology. However, I started following it a lot in April of last year. April is National Poetry Writing Month, and I was really going through it. I was dealing with some identity stuff. I was just moving through a big season of my life, and I was writing a lot of poems because of that writing month. And I was checking my Chani app, astrology, like every day, and it was uncanny how similar the descriptions were to the actual poems that I was writing. And it wasn't just like, oh, cute, there's a word that matches up. Like, it was almost like the exact same sentences, the exact same themes. And so I started noticing more specifically the transits. And I find that almost like the most interesting part of astrology, more than like the chart, the birth chart or anything else, is like the actual transits and how that's affecting you specifically. So it's something that I am very recently, like only in the last year or so, following and paying attention to, but I'm always interested in hearing people's different perspectives. And I especially like the planetary energies and just any like system of thought where you can start to organize things. I feel like it just helps to navigate the different energies that we encounter in our daily lives.
I can't stop thinking, to your point, about this meme that Chani Nichols really recently shared about how the eclipse across America, it like immediately, like the week after, you can see where all of the UCs where people are protesting the war happening in Gaza are all along the exact same equator line, and they keep showing the map on on the news where it's like, these are all the schools, and I keep thinking like, wow, that's just like that thing. But to your point, my boyfriend is not really into astrology, and we had to talk about it and how this is confirmation bias at its peak. But I mean, it's hard to argue when you see a map. It's also data.
Yeah. It's a story. I mean, to your point, Julia, on like the Enneagram was your initial language, like that. And I like how you're describing how astrology, like the transits, or what is interesting to you, because it's more like, basically, I think we all need like a framework. We need like a storytelling framework for being alive. And yours, like,
for
at
this
least
wild
to like
world.
like to understand other people and their basically what makes them tick a little bit. And like, I'm familiar with the Enneagram. We learned it at work, and I love kind of all of like I've done like cliff strengths, I think, and like
Yeah,
just
Clifton
any type of
Strengths. I like
yeah,
that
any
one.
type of freaking personality test. I'm like all over it, and I definitely
Hmm.
feel like astrology is that storytelling framework for me. And then the transits, yeah, I don't want, like, this doesn't need to be a Channy like ad, but it yeah, it's weird. That's actually what's given me more I would say conviction in my intuition, right? Because it's the same thing where I will feel something, I'll know something, I'll just keep like kind of getting the same like audio clairvoyance, essentially. I'll keep getting the same message clairvoyantly, and then I'll see and I'll be like, oh shit. And it is weird, you know, to your point on like confirmation bias, Shaheen, like that's fair and a very Brian way to look at that. But also, yeah, it's just like the information's in me and then it gets confirmed externally, and I find that really interesting. I find that
I
really
like to think of it not as like proof that something is happening, but more so that like it's like seeing a correlation, finding that pattern at all is because our brains are looking for a pattern, and when there's really obvious ones, it's hard to ignore. It's not like
Mhm.
we're piecing it together to tell this story. It's like, oh, there it is. See?
Yeah. There it is
But
again, right? Like it's it's
again.
reoccurring. Um okay. I mean, from that perspective, like in that validation, that intuitive kind of through line, what's it like being professionally intuitive? What does that feel like, and how do you manage kind of your own workflow in that?
Yeah, this is such a good question, and I feel like my answer to this has probably evolved and changed over different seasons of the work that I've done. But lately, I feel like it's just kind of trippy. It's like you're going about your daily life and very normal things are happening, you know, like you're getting ripped off at the store, or you're like encountering someone rude on the street, or you know, you dye your laundry the wrong color, like just very normal things are happening. And then at the same time, there's like someone that you're helping through this profound transformation in their life, or you're noticing a pattern in someone where they're very psychically picking up on what's about to happen, but maybe they're not telling the right story about what that thing is because it hasn't happened yet. And like, people are appointing you to this very powerful position in their lives. And so it's so humbling. It's so like there's so much duality in it to be able to like hold the very normal stuff in our daily lives with the fact that people trust you. Like they trust
Mhm.
you more than a therapist at times. And that is
Definitely.
a very interesting position to be in. And it's such an interesting position to be navigating that identity piece too, because there's you know, a lot of people in my life that know exactly what I do and are very much in the loop, and then there are other people in my life that don't really know the depths of kind of what I'm doing in my day to day. And so it's a really interesting like space to hold that and just kind of bounce between those different states. I don't know how you feel about it, Tanya, but probably
Yeah.
similarly.
Yeah, I'm like nodding along with you because again, you're making points that you're articulating things that I feel that maybe don't ever communicate specifically. Definitely the navigation of the identity, right? Is that some people think I'm a communications consultant and that's what I do full time. And there's that, and then there's people who are like, what's all the witchiness about, like what's that about? And yeah, there's a really interesting navigation now, and I'm sure you feel that too, is that then people start coming to you for different things. And then there's, particularly with one-on-one clients, I find that the line for me is a little unclear sometimes of much how much they want. Like how deep into the spirituality are we willing to venture into? And I'm adopting, and I think I heard this when you were kind of describing shadow play a little bit, is like there's a little bit of an unfolding that comes into it. Instead of going like full force out the gate being like, you ready to talk to your dead grandparents? Like I have to like tone it back a little bit and be like, have you thought about meditation? Like I have to like really kind of ease into it and just and explore and be willing to be okay with that. The other piece that you mentioned here was the duality of holding this like advisory role for folks and then still experiencing the normal bullshit of everyday life, right? So I feel like the difference in corporate America is that everybody is pretending all the time to have all of the right answers, where I've now created a space for myself where it's okay if I don't know all of the answers, and this realization of like, just because I've created success or moving in a certain direction doesn't mean that the problems of life disappear at all. And being okay to exist in both spaces of like, yes, I am an expert at this thing that I do. I'm very passionate about it. I'm good at this, but also I'm a human being who's also figuring things out. Like it is an interesting place to be in and not deny your humanity in it, I guess.
Yeah, and there's such an unspoken language, like the language of energy that flows between me and my clients that have that level of trust, like whether they've told me, formally that I'm in that position, or whether it's like an energetic, just like clear relationship that we have. Even with someone like you, I feel like I could get a message that you need, and like I would trust myself to deliver that message to you, and vice versa. It's a very interesting and beautiful thing to have that like kind of open, you mentioned in the beginning, like an open channel. It's like I'm open for those people that are in my close community or close clients that I've worked with, and that's like ongoing. It's like I get messages for clients that I worked with a year ago, and it's like I just feel their energy. I feel something that's like meant for them, and that's a very interesting position to be in that I feel like is so different than maybe my life before I got into this work.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, a friend of mine died, and then a year later, I went to a psychic, and they were like, "Your dead friend is your angel." That's like a long story, really short. Ever since then, I've been really in touch with like feeling his energy on the other side, feeling anyone who's died's energy on the other side, like even people I've never met who are close with people that I love. And I've even like been at the dog park with strangers and like shared stories like this to people who apparently really needed to hear those stories. And so I wondered, for you, how do you when you share information like that, like to strangers, or do you have like limits with that kind of knowledge or feeling, that sensation that you're getting, and how do you
Yeah.
deal with that?
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll get into this at some point, but some of what I've been working through the last like year and a half is learning that I'm autistic, which
Oh,
explains so many things about my life and my experience and even spirituality. So I feel like my nervous system is much more guarded because of that. Like my nervous
huh.
system is different. My root chakra is different than a neurotypical person. So I feel like
Interesting.
I inherently have actually better energetic boundaries because I just don't have the capacity to be taking in like
You're not going up to strangers and being like, by the way,
yes, it's
you're
not
more guarded than that.
happening really in my like walking down the street. I'm not connecting in that way. It's like there's a translator for
There's
me.
boundaries.
There's boundaries. There's many layers of protection. That doesn't mean I
Uh-huh.
don't feel in my body a strange energy or something
Sure.
off about a specific person, or like a heaviness or a grief, and I could do the work to translate that. But it's like I'm inherently protected because my nervous
Guarded. Yeah,
system's
there's
already like
right. There's
allocated to
fences
many
up in your
other
nervous system.
forms of vigilance.
Huh. That's a really interesting way of putting it. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, a little bit. You. I want to talk about shadow play, and you talked about moving back to San Diego, but I do want to talk about how you stay connected to other creatives, and it's almost like you created the community that you needed. So I want to explore that a little bit with you on like what
Yeah.
was the motivation for it.
I feel like that's part one, but I feel like that's not the full answer because yes, I do feel like there was a gap in terms of people that were super grounded, like had a normal job or had a history of very normal jobs. Like maybe they're not like publicly very spiritual. Like I wanted there to be a space where people from all different walks of life could come, and it wasn't like very similar to what you're doing here on this podcast. Like you're bringing the reality in with the woo woo. Like it's a very similar theme and vibe for us as well. However, I feel like me staying in touch with other creatives is also about being in different communities. So there's something that happens where I can get almost, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but there's that moment where you're like, okay, time to and it's not that you leave the community you're a part of, it's more that you have to continue to see what is out there, and you have to get out of any sort of echo chamber that you're in.
You need new inputs.
You need new
I say that a lot.
new forms of inspiration. Even like we had a meetup on the beach in LA, and we just like had all these different like creatives, healers, intuitives together, and it was so nice to just be out of like my normal, group of people. And I love the people that I spend time with in my community as well. But I think it's so important to continue to see what else is out there, even if it's only to be like, oh yeah, what I have is great.
It's great. Yeah. No thanks on that one.
Yeah. And I'm a part of some poetry communities as well. So just being able to write and be around other types of creatives, I feel like is really helpful for me.
That makes sense. Do you feel like, especially as as you awaken more and more to all of your intuitive sensibilities and they continue to grow and expand, like, do you feel like there are rhythms to your creativity? And I mean, that's another even kind of expansion question on that is like, do you think that your intuition and your creativity are the same thing?
Ooh, okay. One of my favorite questions. I don't know if I've actually been asked that before, but I love it because my spiritual awakening was a creative one. Partly because of the nervous system thing that I mentioned. I don't think I was ready to acknowledge that I was receiving these downloads from the universe or anything like that. And I write about this in my book. That's kind of like the inspiration for the book and that journey of having this creative awakening where poems were just pouring through me. And Danya, you've talked about this before. It's like I thought I was like, wow, this is so beautiful. I'm such a great writer. But it was like, it wasn't me. It was like something was moving through me to help me through a very hard time. I went through a divorce and I fell in love with my now partner, who was someone that I knew a very long time ago, and just had a very like, huge creative awakening and relationship changes in my life as well. So I do feel like for me, my creativity and my intuition speak to me in the same language. So the clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, claircognizance, all the senses,
all the
clairs, speak to me through my creative process as well. So when I'm writing, I'm actually like seeing different visuals and I'm writing to that. So that's how that creative inspiration comes through to me. I think that's kind of the crown chakra, like opening up to receive that divine inspiration. And because I have that trust with my intuition, I'm able to translate it into something that makes sense, into something that can be read as sentences and poems and creative works. What was the other part of your question?
I asked, do you feel like there's rhythms to your creativity?
Oh yeah, the rhythms. Definitely. I feel like last year I was very surprised that I wrote as much as I did. During National Poetry Writing Month, I wrote almost 70 poems.
Oh my God.
Which was just unbelievable to me, because that was probably the most I had written in 5 years, 4 to 5 years.
Mm.
So it was very surprising that all of this was like coming through at that time. But I feel like it was the astrology thing. There was like something in my astrology chart that was really luring me into creative expression. So I feel like sometimes it catches me by surprise, but I have a relationship with myself where I don't push it. I don't force it. I know that it's going to come to me. I know that it's going to come through when it wants to come through. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. I thought I was going to write like 10 poems the entire month. I didn't even set a goal. I was like, yeah, I'll be happy if I write 10. That's fine. And then I wrote almost 70 because I just kept showing up for it. I just kept letting it come through, and I kept writing, and I kept seeing where that was leading me. And it was a huge part of my identity process of kind of figuring out who I was and what I had been moving through. But sometimes I don't write for like 2 years, or I don't write anything like really creative. And when I was doing a year ahead reading for myself for 2024, it was very much about not writing, not creating, just editing, just like cleaning things up and putting it out there. It was so much a year of like finishing what I had started. Like I had this mountain of work and I was ready to like put it out into the world. So I really just trust what I'm feeling and what I know about it. I don't force myself to fit any sort of creative rhythm that doesn't work for me, which I feel like is kind of rare because so many people I know are like, I need to write this many poems, or they start to doubt themselves. They start to doubt that they are creative or are a writer or these identities that they hold if they're not in a creative season. And I just always know that it comes back. It comes back when I'm at the ocean. It comes back when I'm in a romantic time in my life. It comes back when I'm feeling inspired by my spirituality. And one of the things I've learned is like combining the different parts of me. It's like, I think my autistic nature has like made it hard for me to realize that I could do that. So one of the moments that happened last year was that I learned I could just merge the spirituality with the poetry, and out came all of these poems that were like spiritual in nature and spoke about intuition, and it made so much sense, but I just didn't realize that I could merge those things
you're just
together.
Experimenting with new connections.
Totally.
You're going like, oh, okay, click, and seeing
Yes.
and seeing because you're unfolding, and you're one piece of that. There needs to be a merge collaboration. It comes back because I feel like that is so poignant. And to what you just said, for me and Shaheen, I'm curious on like your take, because Shaheen and I have done an entire episode of like what we visualize is like what the creative wave is like, what that is, and what's that's like being in a partnership with one another. But I
creative
feel
collaboration.
Yeah, I feel to like, you're like, I always know it's going to come back. I feel like forgetting that it's going to come back is a little bit a part of my shit, because forgetting is important so that I can go remind myself I am that bitch. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's part of my process, is being like, am I bad at this? And then being like, no, I'm not. I'm really good at this, so that I can like get to the next piece. I don't know. Yeah. I allow myself to forget a little bit. I'm curious, Shaheen, what do you?
Yeah. I was just talking about this yesterday, actually. Funny timing. How I never forget. I'm actually very out of the phase. Like, I'm fully aware of how creative I am. But I know, like, 100%. And I spread my talents, I think, too thin sometimes. Like, last week, I shared with Danya, I was spoon carving. I was carving wood.
Yes.
Wood things. Like, before that, I was styling wigs, and I was chalk painting furniture. And I go through these different things because I know that I have to get something out, but I'm not. What I struggle with is that I wish that I could go back in time and tell myself as a child to like find out what your message is. Like, what do you want to say? You are talented. You can do anything. You can make music. You can paint. You whatever you fucking want to do. But what do you want to say? What do you want people to hear you say? And so, yeah, that's just, I think, what I work on. And to your point about how you merge these different sides, like, I've tried merging too, and it doesn't really help me. Maybe I'm just sassy about it, but I find these ways to merge things, and then I want it to keep going, but it's not like enough for me. I think that you found like a nice connection between like two major overarching sides, but I'm still struggling. I'm like, do I want to make music? Do I want to paint? Do I want to draw? Do I want to blah? So I don't know.
Yeah, it was a
My
long time coming
hmm,
though. I had been
Mhm.
yeah.
doing tarot and intuitive work professionally, and I've written hundreds and hundreds of poems, and
Yeah.
it was just
Well,
that
yeah, I think
moment
that,
where it clicked and like
yeah,
my voice was coming through. It wasn't just like these downloads from the universe and these like
yeah,
other people's inspiration. It was like, this is my voice, this is my message, this is what I want
yeah.
to say, to your point.
Well, I
I'm
think
waiting for
identity
that.
work's really important. And I think like I'm picking that out of what each of us is saying is like, well, Julia, you have been thinking of yourself as a creative person for a long time because you were that professionally even before the intuitive work. And now you've racked up some experience and some time being like, I'm a professional intuitive person. So like you're now very comfortable with both of those identities. And so they're merging makes sense. It makes a lot of sense for you. Shaheen, you even saying like, yeah, no, I know I'm a creative person. Again, you've been a creative person your whole life. You've been told you're a creative person your whole life. You went to school as a creative person, and every job you've ever had is creativity. Like
Yeah,
that is who, you know
I've
what I
got
mean?
it.
So like
I'm
you're
good.
like, I'm creative. Like you know
Yeah.
that because
And my
that's
Venus
been
is in Aries, so I fucking know.
where and I've said this, I think to either of you and just in general, like I'm a writer. Like that identity has been since the moment I was born. But thinking of myself as a just a general creative, that's a newer identity that I'm
Mm,
trying on.
mhm,
Intuition's been there a long time too, but continuing to like push that even of like how much or even like the mediumship or even like
mhm.
touching new pieces of the intuition is like a journey I continue to explore.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think it's identity work. It's like, what are we super comfortable
Yeah.
calling ourselves? And then I think it's like sitting in it for a little while too. Like it takes you some time to put on that new wig, that new mask, like whatever it is.
And to connect it to astrology a bit, one of the struggles that I have with any system or any label is that everyone has their own image and interpretation of what that means. So if I
Hmm.
say I'm a Leo, everyone has a different version of what that means, and then they
Yeah.
project it on you. So
Yeah.
when you're going through a season of like vulnerably claiming a label that feels new to you or feels really like undefined, or you're still defining what that means for yourself, um it's hard to just like openly come out and say that. I think creative is like so abstract and can mean so many different things that it's maybe not as vulnerable. Or writer is it's pretty clear what that means.
Hmm.
But then
Yeah.
when you get into mediumship, spirituality, intuition, all of
Yeah.
those things, it's like everyone has a different version of what that means to them.
Oh, I like
Yeah.
this. It reminds me of coming out like sexually
Hmm.
and like what that means. And I remember going through this phase where I really believed that everyone deserved a period of privacy with that and like
Hmm.
not necessarily having to just come out as gay or whatever, like feel out what those labels mean to you and come out like when you're ready to the right people and like announce it louder at the time. So same with work and creativity and our psychic side of things, like
Hmm.
find out what that means to you and then like share it in a way that feels comfortable
Hmm.
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
it's
and it's
meant
the
to be
same
shared.
with neurodivergence as well. It's like everyone has a very different like idea of what these labels mean, and
Hmm.
my hope for any label is that that's just a jumping off point for
Yeah.
curious questions.
Hmm.
And like, okay,
Yeah.
Everything is.
yeah, what does that mean to you? But
Hmm.
Hmm.
sometimes we let that be like the period instead of like the
Yeah.
ellipse,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what keeps us from the person. Actually, I do. Okay, sorry to bring it back to astrology for a second here. Um, So let's talk about your nodes for a second, because I read a really interesting thing about your south node that I think actually really relates to this conversation that I wanted to share with you. Okay, so we talked about your big
South
three.
node tea spills.
Yeah, we talked about your big three. So Sag rising, Leo moon, Leo sun, Gemini moon. And then your nodes, your north node is in Sag and your south node is in Gemini. For the listener who's not like super familiar with nodes, just a quick recap. North node it's where your destiny in this lifetime is pointing you towards. Essentially, it's like the path that you're meant to walk towards. Your south node, they say, is like the karma that travels with you into this life. It's the gifts that potentially you possessed in another life. It's kind of like your safe zone. And then you're trying to grow sort of beyond that towards your north node in this life. So with your Gemini south node, that's it's a little bit about or the thing that I read that connects to this is that privacy, like something that you're meant to be outgrowing with your south node in Gemini, is that privacy is a container that only works for a little while. I read that and like that connected with me for you in terms of
I
like
like that.
yeah, there's this, what Shaheen was saying, there totally is this time where you're kind of sitting with it
For a little while.
yeah, for a little while, but that is not your that's not meant you're not meant to do that. Actually, you're meant to like share these new like yeah, you're meant to like break out of the privacy at a certain point because it's important for you to like share beyond that.
It's a
And
cocoon
Sages
of
have no
safety.
fucking filter. They're just like blah 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 all the time.
That's so interesting that you said that,
mhm.
because I just moved back to San Diego, and one of the intuitive hits that I've gotten is like this craving of like, I want my world to be smaller, which is like not it. Like when I felt that, I was like, ooh, I don't know, let me stuff that back down. But it was loud and clear. It was like, I want my world to be smaller. And I thought that was so interesting. And so you brought up privacy, and that's something I've been like sitting with and playing with. Like I've been sharing my work for a couple of years online, and I built this beautiful community that's virtual, but within this like held container. So it is a little bit more private. We're able to have these more in-depth conversations. And, I think it just is really interesting that you say that, because my Sag rising, and you said south node or north node in Sag?
It's your north node, yeah.
Yeah, so both of those being like a direction for me to move in, I just don't always resonate with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like being autistic, like there's so many sensory needs that I have and so many challenges with like having a lot of energy to go out into the world and kind of express in that way. But it's fascinating, and it's this tension that I feel like I'm moving through in this season.
And in real in real time. And I think that's fair to kind of talk about, and it's a little bit of what you were saying earlier of like each person has their own interpretation of what each piece means, and so potentially that like privacy piece is up for you to explore. What does privacy even mean to you? What does your inner circle versus your outer circle look like? And it doesn't mean necessarily like showing up in any specific way, but it just means like it might even just be about your intuitive expansion, your intuitive growth of like the things that are coming into you are not just for you, right? Like these are things that need to be shared with other folks.
Yeah.
You know what? Okay, new hot take on Sagittarius. I just realized every Sagittarius I know is like instinctually like really good at and never has had to work at having privacy for themselves. Isn't that weird? Because Sagittarian energy to me is very like social and fun and also careless and boundaryless to this point of like needing like boundary, or you having already like safeguards in your mind that keep your nervous system protected. Sagittarian energy I don't think has that in their description anyways. But everyone that I know has like this ability to like have their quiet time to themselves, and it never really seems like they need it or anything. Like I'm as a Taurus, I like need my quiet time. I need to leave early. I'm hungry when I'm hungry. But Sagittarians, they might have all those things. And they're going to leave with me early and go get food. But also, no one ever criticizes them for it. So I don't know. There's something about
Mm.
this. I need to get
Yeah,
that off
because
my
they
chest.
seem like they're going to another party. That's what like
They
Sagittarians give
always,
the
yeah,
yeah, they seem like they're going to a better party, and so no one's like worried about it. But it
right.
might in fact be
They
that they
might
need to
just be
go
coming home with
recharge.
me to eat quesadillas and
Uh-huh.
hummus.
Yeah,
Mm.
it might be that
Interesting.
call. Okay, and I want to just wrap up on what's inspiring you right now. Like, is there any content or yeah, what are the inputs right now? Obviously, being in a new place is probably very inspiring in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like what's inspiring me, so I'm watching Heartbreak High, and I didn't know that there was an
Hmm.
autistic character, but I was like watching and just saw this scene playing out, and I related to it. I like felt it so deeply, and then I look her up and I'm like, oh yeah, I have this girl's book. Like I know
Hmm.
about her.
Wait,
I
Heartbreak High or Heartbreaker? What are you talking about?
Heartbreak High.
Oh, I haven't heard of it. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Um yeah, so I'm watching this and seeing these like teenagers and just it's something that feels very healing and raw in a lot of ways to like see this friendship that
Yes.
she has, her best friend in the show. So the character's name is Quinny, and then her best friend in the show, their name is Darren, and there's this scene where they're at a party and she's like having a moment, just really struggling, and they lock her and in the bathroom, and they're like, this is our home now, and they just sit there together, and it's
Oh,
just
Oh,
this sweet moment of like, take your time, like take the time that you need to just be
hmm.
here and recover. And
That
I just
sounds
feel
really
like I'm moving
healing.
through a lot of like healing those
Mm-hmm.
relationships of not understanding what I needed for myself, and just
Hmm.
kind of bypassing all of my own boundaries because I couldn't have them. And that kind of comes back to the Sag thing of like
Mm-hmm.
learning what those boundaries are for myself so that I can honor them. So I'm loving that show and just seeing that representation.
I
Anything that
love
has an
that. Yeah.
autistic character, I'm like, let me watch it and let me
That
like kind
reminds
of
me.
feel their experience.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that reminds me of I confused what you were talking about with the show Heartstopper, and
Mm,
very similarly, I don't know if you seen the show Heartstopper.
I've heard
It's
of
about
it. Yeah.
like teens who are gay and like coming out or like figuring out what that means for them. And I think that what you're, I don't know, when I watched that show, I was like, I was crying through so much of it in a really happy cry way because I felt like that watching teenagers go through these things and have these conversations and like have it be public is something that I didn't get when I was their age. So it's so adorable to watch. And I feel that in you describing you watching this kind of situation
Yeah,
play out with neurotypical people.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something I'm loving. I've mostly been trying to like tune into myself and just kind
Mm,
of clear out all of the inputs as much as
Hmm.
possible.
yeah.
Another book I really loved was The Many Lives of Mama Love. I think
Hmm.
Hmm.
Danya, I think you would really like it.
Okay. I'll
Yeah,
write that
it's a
down.
memoir about a woman and just like the lives that she's gone through.
I love that. I'll have to check that out.
Sounds like fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Julia, thank you for spending time with us today. This was an incredible conversation. I knew it was going to be, and I
Yeah.
just appreciate you holding this space with Shaheen and I and sharing so much of yourself with everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.